Hi, welcome to the History Talks. I'm your host, Will. This is Sebastian. In this episode, we continue our series on ancient Rome, and we'll be discussing Julius Caesar's rise to the pinnacle of Roman politics. So, Sebastian, tell me, how did Caesar climb to the top?
In 59 BC, Caesar was elected to the consulship, and his campaign for consulship received significant help from Marcus Licinius Crassus, who was the richest man in Rome, and Gnaeus Pompeius, another talented general who had got his position by aiding Sulla and kept it by being a skilled commander.
So Caesar had backing from the richest man in Rome. Were political campaigns in ancient Rome like they are now in the United States, where a candidate needs significant financial backing to run for high office?
That is certainly a fair comparison.
Interesting.
Now, Crassus and Pompey were once political rivals, but Caesar managed to smooth things over between them, creating an alliance between the three called the First Triumvirate. And this triumvirate gave Caesar a lot of power, so much power, in fact, a satirist at the time once remarked that they were in a consulship of Julius and Caesar. And this was due to how much power Caesar was able to flex over the government.
So Caesar really started to take control of the Roman political system at this time. Around what age was he?
He was about early 40s, and a key example of how much power Caesar really did have was when he passed a law created by him and Pompey, which involved redistributing public lands to the poor, primarily agricultural lands, and this received not only disapproval, but active attempts to block from 3 tribunes of the plebs, from the Senate, from Caesar's own co-consul, Biblius. Yet, despite all of this, Caesar got it passed regardless.
You know, that sounds a lot like Tiberius, at least in terms of what he was trying to accomplish, right? Tiberius wanted land reforms for the poor. He wanted the poor to be able to acquire more land. However, he was not successful in that. In fact, he was murdered by the rulers, the elites that did not want this. However, it sounds like Caesar figured out this populist formula and figured out how to get this land reform through.
Exactly. And Caesar used this public aid from Crassus and Pompey so much that it led to suspicions of foul play. In fact, one anecdote I found during my research is around the birth of Christ, a historian named Velleius Paterculus wrote a book called The History of Rome, and in it, Velleius straight up accuses Caesar of rigging an election because Caesar was re-elected to the consulship, this time with Pompey as his co-consul, for a second term. And Velleius says that during this second re-election, Caesar rigged or cheated the vote.
Accusations of rigged elections, once again, that sounds a lot like U.S. politics.
Exactly. And while his power wasn't yet absolute, it was clear that Caesar had already begun laying the foundation for his later dictatorial powers. Now, Caesar had been aching to go back on campaign, and an opportunity for this arose when some of Rome's Gallic allies had been defeated by a rival tribe known as the Helvetii.
So when you're talking about the Gauls, you're talking about the people that lived in the area that we now know as France.
Exactly. Prior to Caesar's campaign, Roman influence in Gaul had been limited, as all they had were some allies and a small conquered region in the southeast, which was still costly to maintain due to the need of a military presence to fend off northern Gallic raids. And for long, the Gauls had been strong enough and good enough with numbers and weaponry to hold off the Romans, but the Gauls had been able to push back due to how internally divided they were. This meant there was a sort of status quo formed along the border of Gaul and Rome. But this would be broken when the Helvetii attacked, because despite being led by the skillful Gallic general Ariovistus, the invading Helvetii were defeated by Caesar, leading to fear amongst nearby tribes as Caesar then occupied that land and served as its proconsul.
So at this point, not only had Caesar taken power over Roman politics, he also led the army in its conquest of Gaul.
Yes. A year later, a similar situation happens in northern Gaul, this time involving a group of northern Gallic tribes known collectively as the Belgae. And after defeating and conquering these tribes, Caesar would then go on to conquer the whole region, tie it down, and eventually have control over almost all of what is now France. And ever ambitious, Caesar then continued by sailing up to Britain and trying to conquer there what he could. Keep in mind that at this point, the Romans considered Britain this mysterious place. Some Romans even thought that Britain was just a myth, but regardless, Caesar sailed up with as much of army and supplies as he could, and attempted to conquer it, though no amount of victory in battle could overcome the fact that he didn't know the terrain, he barely could occupy the region, and he had to make trips back to Gaul every winter because lack of supplies.
And I imagine part of his difficulty in taking Britain had to do with the fact that it was an island, and therefore he had to cross a sea to get his army and his supplies over there to attack.
Precisely. And after a revolt occurred in Gaul, Caesar sailed back to Gaul, put down the revolt, and he never went back to Britain. He tied down the region and crushed the revolt, and that was that. And Caesar was disappointed that he couldn't conquer Britain, but that is that. And soon, Caesar became so powerful due to his influence in Gaul that he even scared politicians back at home. Not only politicians in general, but also his previous ally, Pompey. Pompey was scared of Caesar's power now, and so he had aligned himself with the Senate in order to counter Caesar.
So even though Caesar had been stopped by the Britons, he had already amassed enough power and land that he was considered a threat to the ruling elite back in Rome.
Yes.
And we will discuss that and the remainder of Julius Caesar's life in our next episode of the History Talks. See you all then.